Yes, I'm Atso from Finland, and I'm supposed to try to summarize a little bit the experience we have got compiled in the ECOKNOWS project. And so there are a lot of collaborators of this speech sitting here in the audience. I try to summarize, give an overview, go a little bit deeper in the issue of what priors are, how to make them useful, and so. Looks good.
Yes, okay.
Thanks. Okay, thank you. So, I guess everybody knows that we are having an accumulation of information in the scientific society. We are very effective publication system which produces more and more information for us. And this is just a simple example about the number of information, number of articles, scientific articles, which is accumulating over the years. And quite often, of course, we are, especially in the fisheries science, dealing with similar type of issues in different studies. And in fact, most of the issues are already more or less studied before we start to study them ourselves. So the question is then how to utilize this information which is accumulating. As we have heard from previous talks already, in the Bayesian approach, very effective use of prior information is something which is really needed and what we are supposed to do instead of pretending that we don't know about the phenomenon we are studying about. To my mind, the easiest way to understand the Bayesian approach is a learning process, which this diagram tries to illustrate. We first consider, in the first study that we start to model or study some phenomenon, we create a model, what we think about the phenomenon. And then we have, from the various background sources, we have the prior information, and we have an idea about this, how this prior information is connected to the phenomenon. And we have our own observations, our own data. And we combine them formally into the posterior. And then later on, same person or another person carries out a second study. And it would be very logical, of course, to use the existing information as a prior for the second study, and so on. So this is kind of a successive process, which would be, in the perfect word, the way to do it. However, as Bayesian approach has been just recently been implemented widely, we are often in the situation of the first study. We have a lot of background information which is not really put into the formal context of Bayesian inference. And the key question often is there then how to do this correctly, how to compile this rapidly accumulating knowledge so that we start this chain of studies in a way correctly. And there we face the questions like where we find existing knowledge. And then often studies slightly vary from one to another. The question is this information more relevant or somehow better than another piece of information in another study? Sometimes knowledge is not really quantified. How to quantify that? And then if there are several pieces of information, how to merge them into one prior to be used. Priors expose themselves in various ways. Of course, everybody sitting here is very knows very well primary data and how important that is, especially in so-called data analysis aspect. But because they are the original observations of the phenomenon, so I think it's fair to say that they could be also preferred in the Bayesian context, because they are the primary observations themselves about the phenomena. So, if we have such a primary data, and now I'm not talking about the primary data of the study in concern, for which we want to apply prior, then we have to take primary data from somewhere else, in time or space. And the question is then, how exactly one-to-one is the observations or the process from which observations are collected in this adjacent region or different time period of the phenomenon we are studying. Further, it's quite common that there are only, say, 1 or 2 studies from which we get raw data. And then the question is really how to merge formally together this information so that it is really reflecting something from the study area or the study period we are interested in. The second source of background information is literature, and it's of course highly ranked. I would include under this category also grey literature, something we haven't published so well. I think it can be often even more valuable than the very formalized articles which must follow the format of the publisher and which therefore may lack such information which is relevant when you think about how to use that literature for prior. Then again, we end up questions like how to weigh different prior information, different articles which may be contrasting in concern the parameters we are studying. Somewhere beyond not having the either raw data or not having even grey literature, we start to think, well, of course there must be experts in the field, and we may actually know someone who has been, for instance, collecting observations somewhere, but not keeping very good document on that. And expertise is something which is, to my mind, very important piece of prior information, although it's often undervalued because people may think that it's too trivial information what experts have, or they cannot express their beliefs very well, and so people easily think that, okay, it's too complex to try to utilize that information. However, I don't find this the use of expertise so desperate as it could be in the first sight, especially when you start to think about somehow the process, the dynamics of some phenomenon. To describe that, that will open also the eyes of the expert, that okay, I actually understand this is how it goes, or there are 2 or 3 alternatives for the processes, but not more. And one may be able to construct both the priors and the prior information or background information for the process, which means different competing models what to apply. Databases could form one more source of background information, but in fact databases often are compiled from the raw data or literature, which are already the categories what I have mentioned. But then maybe some exception is made by say, process data or model data, like ICS databases, stock assessment, which are not really necessarily published directly, but could be valuable in some of the analysis. When one tries to really put a shape for the prior, whatever is the origin of the prior information, there are two major pathways to follow. One is to think one could, okay, it's a little bit arbitrary or artificial categorization, but anyway, one could think that computing, really calculating using computer the priors is one major pathway. And that could be applied, of course, most easily to raw data, but also in the meta-analysis of literature information. And here is just one example of studying through meta-analysis the maximum egg survival of herring eggs in different herring stocks. What the information what has been found from the literature about stock recruit dynamics and the maximum egg survival. And you can see that the meta-analysis, the result of the meta-analysis provides stock-specific posteriors for each stock, but also it gives a predictive distribution for unobserved stock, which could be then used as a prior for your own study. Funnily, this example also indicates how actually this kind of meta-analysis itself needs prior. So behind there, along the zero axis, there is actually prior distribution, which is here, in this case, so-called non-informative prior. Then more literature is emerging in the field of deriving priors, like Murdoch McAllister has been publishing some methodologies on getting priors for production models. More lately, Simon et al. And then we jump from these examples to expert elicitation, what I mentioned earlier. I mentioned that constructing the process itself may help experts to realize what they should be after. And here is an example of structured elicitation of carrying capacity of the spawning rivers of Atlantic salmon in the Baltic Sea. Sometimes experts keep on thinking that their way, how they describe the process is the only correct way. And then, for instance, scientists and fisheries administrators may have a different view of the world. And then you have two model versions, which you could also, of course, analyze separately and somehow compare which performs better. Then finally, I jump into the example where John has been much involved, which is about make a simple tool for deriving expert opinions without really analyzing any data. But often, the experts may need some graphical illustration of their beliefs, and they can wonder and think more carefully if this kind of shape of distribution really is what they think about the parameter in concern. And now I check if the hyperlink works. No, it's not working here. guessed it. I could have shown you how you can actually, where is the, oops. Okay, one can easily, by adjusting like the values there, if you look at the uppermost row there, modes and mode weight, those two values, choosing them, adjusting them, you can change the distribution of the prior. It's very handy, it's very easy, and it nicely shows you the impact of different assumptions. So these were very hastily drawn examples of most of them were from the ECOKNOWS project, about how to deal with priors, how to provide priors for the Bayesian approach in general in fish stock assessment. The plan is in the ECOKNOWS project to produce write a manuscript for the ICS Cooperative Research Report series, summarizing the project's experience and our priors, so to say, concerning how we see priors and how we see the best practices of deriving priors. This is, of course, our prior. And the reader of the manual, once it's published, can make his or her own prior, or whether we are really correct with this. So I want to put this also in the Bayesian context, because I think it's fair. We haven't yet found the final truth. We cannot argue like that. But I hope this manual, once it's published, it will be of use. And for instance, we aim at presenting there in the manual this kind of decision tree, which helps in choosing the methodology, what to apply in any study, whether to base some derivation of priors into the meta-analysis or prior elicitation of experts, and what are the possible pitfalls there to be care of, and so on. So, thank you very much. This was all for now, and I hope that you will be able to read the report once it's published. Thank you.